Good evening and thanks for joining us. Tonight, we're learning more about one of the people caught in last week's landslide just outside of Pemberton. Brett Dieterich's family says he died saving others. The 36-year-old is presumed swept away by the mud and debris. His body has not been recovered. Today, his sister spoke exclusively with our Belle Puri.
It's an image of horror, a story of heartbreak.
The car up front is Brett and Madison's vehicle.
Brett Dieterichs and Madison Van Ryn were in one car. Dieterich's mother, Brenda, was behind in another as the trio convoyed to the coast in bad weather. Just outside of Lillooet, the Duffy Lake Road was blocked by a landslide.
So my brother got out of the car to go and see if he could help, or if anyone needed help, or if there was anything he could do.
His mother was also out of her car to walk her dog when suddenly
they heard a really intense loud rumble and the whole ground shook, and last thing my mom remembers is my brother just screamed, "Mom, get back in your car." When she did, just in the nick of time, she said her bum basically touched the seat and the whole car started to slide off the mountainside.
Other motorists helped pull Brenda Dieterichs and her daughter-in-law from the debris.
There was mud up to their thighs, and they tried to have a look around. But people were just trying to get them out of danger's way and get them to the other side. So they trudged through the mud and got out of there.
Brett Dieterichs didn't make it back to his vehicle in time. The mountain came down on top of him. Searchers have failed to find his body.
I would love nothing more than to get my brother back. But I also believe that everyone involved is, of course, doing everything that they possibly could, and I wouldn't expect other people to put themselves in danger for a recovery effort.
The 36-year-old and his family were moving from the interior to the coast to begin what they hoped would be a new life. Dieterichs had trained as a paramedic and volunteered during last summer's wildfires. His goal was to become a Victoria firefighter. Friends have started a GoFundMe campaign.
I would like to give my brother the celebration of life that he deserves, and also so that, the love of his life could just take some time to heal.
Dieterich's sister says he died doing what came most naturally to him.
Helping. This is what he did for everyone.
Belle Puri, CBC News, Victoria.
Just a horrible story, and our thoughts are with his family. Now, with British Columbians already grappling with so much, we are expecting a series of storms. The government warns the next 10 days could be very challenging. But as we wait for this heavy rain, work to recover from all of this can't stop. Dan Burrett joins us live with more now. Dan, let's start with the supply chain. What's the update there?
We're told it is moving, thankfully. Shelves are being stocked. Milk deliveries are back to 80% of normal. The province has been working with the U.S., and today more exemptions are in place for truckers carrying goods. CP Rail has restarted operations. CN is set to have trains rolling tomorrow, but there are still communities that are cut off, including several First Nations. So the province is working to move food, medication, and staff to remote areas, and it's setting up special teams with Indigenous agencies.
We must improve our communications with First Nation communities in advance of and during emergencies. We need to streamline our processes to help people access supports more easily. And we can work to ensure that the supports provided to First Nation communities are meeting the needs identified by the communities themselves.
As you said, Anita, we have special weather warnings in place, so the government says there could be some preemptive road closures. They're going to monitor all of this over the next 10 days.
Okay, and let's move to Abbotsford now, where there is some good news about Highway 1.
Yes, thankfully, Highway 1 through the Fraser Valley may open tomorrow because water levels are going down. The province says work continues to remove debris on some stretches, but reopening, again, depends on the weather. If it does reopen, it's great news for people needing to get between Abbotsford and Chilliwack. Right now, that detour is more than double the normal time. Meanwhile, Agriculture Minister Lana Popham says she met with 30 farmers along Highway 1 yesterday. Amid tears and hugs were heroic stories to share, including two farming brothers, Rudy and Carl.
Waters came up so fast on Monday, they couldn't get their livestock out. And so all 180 dairy cows were up to their necks in water. And those brothers went in and fed those cows hay for 2 days while those cows were submerged in that water. And I have to say that on Wednesday, the waters receded. The cows are fine and they're back online and they're milking those cows.
Popham says, though, there is a lot of worry about removing dead animals. Popham suggests 20,000 hogs and thousands of chickens have died in this flooding. They expect to have more accurate numbers in the coming weeks. Also lost a huge amount of crops. Abbotsford Mayor Henry Braun says some blueberry farms may not see regrowth for up to 5 years after they were wiped out underwater, and some farmers aren't sure if they will be able to replant at all. Anita.
Dan Burrett live tonight. Thanks, Dan. And staying in Abbotsford, a do not use water advisory has been issued for all of Sumas Prairie.
A large portion of Sumas Prairie lake bottom remains underwater. This new advisory is being put in place due to the inaccessible water main breaches that are impacting the drinking water system. This means that running water in Sumas Prairie can only be used for flushing toilets.
This advisory replaces the previous boil water advisory that was issued on the 18th. The do not use water advisory is expected to be in place for several days. No other areas of the Abbotsford water system are affected, and the water there does remain safe to drink. Now, we've learned a lot about flood management, dikes, and the history of the Sumas Prairie, which was a lake up until 100 years ago. Our Justin McElroy has been taking a closer look at the government's managing those systems, and as he found out, it's not the province.
Broken. That's the word used by consultants to describe BC's flood risk prevention strategies. The reason is simple. In 2003 and 2004, the province devolved responsibility for flood management to municipalities. And in the Lower Mainland, there are 26 of them, all competing for the same provincial and federal dollars with no regional coordination or plan in place. That causes both overlap and other municipalities not taking the lead, waiting for others to, and some smaller municipalities simply not having the money to act. Today, Public Safety Minister Mike Farnworth said in the future, that's something they're going to be looking at.
We recognize that many communities don't have that capacity, which is also why we're currently preparing the BC flood strategy, which is part and parcel of the work along with that legislation that's in place. We have done funding for many projects, over $105 million since we took office in 2017, to have improved flood mapping and capacity building amongst First Nations. And capacity building for local communities. But we know this, there's a lot more that needs to be done.
Of course, even if the province does take over responsibility for flood management or puts in some regional oversight, it does nothing to solve the problems of this month or potentially next week when more atmospheric rivers are on the way for this region. And as well, it doesn't deal with the looming issue of a series of aging dikes that many say are unsafe that will have to be upgraded at some point, regardless of whose responsibility it is. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
And we'll be talking again tomorrow with Justin for a closer look at various flood management systems and the challenges cities are facing in preventing floods. Now, flood-ravaged communities are watching the skies with bated breath as they brace for the next onslaught of heavy downpours. Soldiers and residents in Abbotsford scrambled all day to make sandbags to prevent another disastrous deluge. David Common takes us through the preparations ahead of the next storm.
Just a week ago, salmon were swimming through the streets here. Now, soldiers are trying to stop a new storm from repeating the disaster.
Right now, we're just making sandbags to help out the nearby towns.
Yesterday, Corporal Anita Bathe was a court clerk in Vancouver. Called upon by the Army, she's now among 500 soldiers assisting BC.
Our job here is to sandbag this breach point and prevent that from happening again should there be another major rain event.
Which there is tonight.
Which I believe is coming tonight.
Another storm dumping a week's rain in a day, followed by another Saturday. As urgent as all this work is, there are many areas in this province that are even more dire and desperately have been pleading to have soldiers on the ground. The town of Princeton has been at the top of that list, the mayor asking the province to send soldiers, has finally had those calls answered.
Having them here is a big sigh of relief, especially since we've got that other atmospheric river on its way and we're preparing for the worst.
So much of this effort has been led by volunteers, now exhausted after 10 punishing days. In less populated areas where highways have been catastrophically wiped away, communities are cut off, getting equipment in impossible. So there may have been no help beyond airlifts getting people and livestock out. But unless new storms make matters worse, the top soldier on the ground says there won't be more troops coming.
We're confident right now in the numbers that we've got are about the right number to deal with the operation that we've got.
The damage in BC, certainly in the billions of dollars, is still not fully accounted for because we haven't seen all of it yet. David Common, CBC News, Abbotsford, BC.
Brady Strachan is in Princeton right now. Brady, you watched the military in action filling all of those sandbags behind you. How important has it been to have that help?
Yeah, Anita, it was quite the scene here as there was 25 to 30 members of the armed forces filling up these sandbags, and all of these sandbags are going to go to help protect the town's main dikes here in Princeton. They're worried about the weather forecast and what could come and a possible another flooding event in town. Apart from the military here, we've also seen the locals really banding together to help each other out. We were in town in one of the hardest hit areas today, and volunteers were going into the homes that have been flooded and taking out all of the furniture, the clothes, everything that has been water damaged and contaminated, piling up it in front of homes. There's a real effort to try and get this work done before the real freezing temperatures come and it gets too cold for them to do too much work here. Volunteers are all pitching in to help their community. I spoke to one of them earlier.
There's been some outpouring of support from other communities and things, donations and things like that, and a few people coming to help, which we're really appreciative of, but a lot of it is locals, like these guys running the equipment here, hauling things away. It's been nice and to see that outpouring of support and the volunteerism.
Yeah, the community's been doing so much there, but it's clear that help is really needed. Let's turn now to the area of Tulameen, hard hit by these floods as well. Residents have been stranded without access to homes or power after the roads were washed away. What are those people telling you?
Yeah, we made it there as well, Anita, just about 30 minutes away, just outside of Tulameen along Tulameen River Road. It runs right along where the Tulameen River is, and we got to see the damage for ourselves. The road is completely washed out for about 100 to 200 meters. There are about 20 homes on the other side of that, and the residents there are very worried. They don't know when the road is going to get rebuilt. They're having a hard time getting to their properties. Right now they're using ATVs, but there's already snow in the area. They don't have any power. They're having to use generators to keep power on in their homes and keep their homes warm. They say they're in some big need of some help, and they're hoping the government can come in and help them.
I'm shocked at how much damage has been done and how cut off we've become in such a short time. One emergency and suddenly we're stranded, and that's a challenge for us.
And Anita, this is what we're hearing from them, that they're worried about the winter about to come. They want to get the power on. They want to see if the road can be rebuilt before winter comes, because right now they feel that they're just kind of getting forgotten as BC deals with this major flooding emergency.
Brady Strachan for us tonight in Princeton. Thanks, Brady. So yeah, a lot of people watching closely tonight, and some of this rain is already starting to come in, isn't it?
Yes, Anita, it has started here in Metro Vancouver. It has just picked up in the past 20 minutes. Hasn't quite made it out to Brady yet, but the system is tracking west and east overnight. The bullseye for the heaviest rain will actually be on the northwest side of Vancouver Island. That's where they're expecting 150 millimeters. Crews were out all day clearing culverts and ditches, especially because of the excess of leaves we have this time of the year. and BC Hydro getting ready to moderate the flows on some of their dams. Take a listen.
Well, like anything, it's timing. It's how high the tides are, how much storm winds can push a storm surge into the estuary, how the Browns, the Solom River react, and how much water we can hold back here. Calm River, a larger system, but similar. So in this case, the king tides aren't aligning to this storm, so that's a good thing.
So we do also have that melting snow, as we keep hearing about, this side of the South Coast, not hit as hard last week, but this is where the atmospheric river is essentially pointing its fire hose this time round. It would be a very different story for the Fraser Valley eastward if we were getting these kinds of totals, and not in a good way. But let me take you through the satellite and radar, because we are still getting substantial rain. You can see sort of the fire hose almost lining up now with the South Coast. We will continue to get heavy rain, sort of continuing to accelerate through the overnight. It's an all Thursday story, and this is tapping into some subtropical moisture. The center of the fire hose really hitting central coastal sections now, so things are going to increase in intensity, as well as pick up those melting snow levels. Here's a look at those warnings right now: 50 to 80 millimeters. That does include Abbotsford out towards Hope. We've got the wind warnings right up the west coast. And Anita, this is all with the first of 3 atmospheric river systems expected over the next 6 days. I'll take you through the other 2 coming out.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
With so many animals displaced by the floods, the BC SPCA is now offering adoptions for half price to open up space in shelters.
As we try to move the homeless animals out of our shelter and get them wonderful homes so that we have capacity within our facilities to provide that temporary care for people who just need a safe space for their animals until they can go home, claim their animals, and be reunited again.
From now until the 8th of December, all animal adoptions across the province will be 50% off. The BC SPCA has been given free emergency boarding for pets in flood-impacted areas in the Lower Mainland, Vancouver Island, and the interior. Anyone looking for a discount dog or a cut-rate kitten can visit the BC SPCA website for photos and descriptions of animals looking for a forever home. Turning to COVID-19 now, the rolling average of new cases in BC is continuing its downward track with 322 reported today. Though there's been an increase in the daily deaths, with 9 people having died in the last 24 hours. Of the active cases, the number of patients in hospital has dropped to 318, with 109 in ICU. Now, the pandemic has taught us the importance of staying home when we're sick, and now the province is making it easier for workers to take those days off, mandating 5 paid sick days a year for workers. It's the most days out of any Canadian province, but as Isabel Regem tells us, some say it doesn't go far enough.
This is far and wide. Brianne McDaniel is the co-owner of 2 shops in Kamloops. They have 14 staff, more than half of them working part-time. She feels a 5-day paid sick day policy is good for both workers and business.
Our employees are our greatest asset. Our customers are right up there, though. And investing in them is a long-term investment for our business.
The new program will apply to almost everyone working in BC, including part-time employees. It does not apply to entrepreneurs, however, working for themselves, but would apply to their employees.
Considering that the businesses are still hurting and, using the research and data available to us, we believe 5 days is the right approach in British Columbia.
In May, the province gave all workers up to 3 days of paid sick leave for those affected by COVID-19 until December 31st. With that program, BC is reimbursing employers $200 per day. Dr. Bonnie Henry says the pandemic has highlighted even more the need for paid sick days.
We know when someone is forced to go to work when they are ill, the workplace is at risk, and we have seen that too.
Last month, the BC Federation of Labour rallied for 10 paid days. In a statement today, it called the news disappointing.
This government appears to listen much more to the voices of business people than instead of regular working people.
Unifor's Western Regional Director agrees.
Failure of leadership, actually. At a time when we're just on the cusp of the federal government introducing 10 paid sick days for workers, British Columbia workers learned today that they're two-tier citizens, that they're only going to have coverage for 5 paid sick days.
The Greater Vancouver Board of Trade says the new program will be challenging for many small businesses who have not budgeted for this cost. McDaniel has paid sick days on a case-by-case basis prior to this announcement, but she's pleased to see a province-wide standard and says the 5 days is just a minimum.
Sometimes you come down with mono or the flu where you need to isolate for more than 5 days, and it makes sense for the employers to take on some of that burden.
Ultimately, the business owner says it's just another move towards healthier and happier workforces. Isabel Regam, CBC News, Vancouver.
BC's Human Rights Commissioner has found what she calls disturbing racial disparities in policing across the province.
People may wonder what over-policing actually looks like. It looks like Max Johnson, a health-sick grandfather who was handcuffed in front of his granddaughter when police mistakenly thought he had presented a piece of fraudulent ID.
In her report to the Special Committee on Reforming the Police Act, Kasari Govender found Indigenous, Black, Asian, and Hispanic people were highly overrepresented in arrests and that many were experiencing mental health issues. A majority of the people detained or charged were men, but Indigenous women were arrested at a higher rate than white men. Among the recommendations, a ban on arbitrary street checks and no longer having officers take on mental health responses. A Surrey RCMP officer has been charged with assault and making threats during an arrest. The charges against Constable Zubair Mohammed Hassan stem from an arrest he made last December. We don't have any more details about what happened, but the officer was formally charged today and is due to appear in court on December 13th. The search is on for a man who appeared at an Abbotsford high school today brandishing a large knife. It prompted the lockdown of 3 schools, an elementary, a middle, and Yale Secondary School. Abbotsford police are looking for this man to understand his motives. They're unable to say if he is connected to one of the school communities or provide other details like his age. 5 years ago, 2 students, one fatally, were stabbed by a man who walked into Abbotsford Senior Secondary. Well, new video is being released today of a number of controversial arrests at the Wet'suwet'en blockade last week. Among the 14 detained, documentary filmmaker Michael Toledano, who shot this video.
This is a private residence and you are trespassing. You need to leave now.
Toledano was at the site filming a documentary for the CBC's Passionate Eye. The Canadian Association of Journalists says they are deeply concerned by the arrests of journalists at the protest, and federal cabinet ministers criticize the RCMP action, citing press freedom. Toledano is heard clearly identifying he is a journalist and working on a documentary for the CBC.
I'm a member of the media. I'm filming a documentary for CBC television. You are twisting my wrist. I'm a member of the media.
Members of the Wet'suwet'en Nation have established a resistance camp in their traditional territory. They are trying to stop Coastal GasLink from drilling a tunnel under the Morris River. Dozens of Catholic charities with hundreds of millions in assets, all in the hands of a small group that once ran residential schools. The CBC investigation is coming up. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Well, the mudslides and floods here in BC have put the fragility of Calgary's food system into sharp focus. Most of the city's produce is imported during winter months, but one farm is looking to change that.
What we're really trying to do is get to a sustainable, secure food future to feed the people locally, and we're trying to do that while in pursuit of a lot of these net zero sustainability goals. We're basically growing a range of herbs and leafy greens inside the city, inside of a warehouse that's being sold to the local communities, restaurants, and retailers. Here at New Leaf, what we've been able to accomplish is reduce our water consumption versus traditional agriculture by about 99%, reduced the land that we need to grow our food by about 98%. Transportation reduction has been about 99%. So we've reduced our food waste by about 70%, and we've completely eliminated the use of pesticides and the production of any agricultural runoff. If you think about traditional agriculture, you're looking at a square foot to produce a crop. Inside that grow room, we'll grow up to 22 crops in that same square foot. Highly perishable crops that we're typically importing from other countries. We're going to see them growing up walls. So it really increases our efficiency on land use there. And inside of this room, we're able to create artificial environments and the ideal growing conditions all year round. So we'll grow up to 15 growing seasons a year out of this grow room, as again compared to other areas where you can get 1, maybe 3 crop cycles. We don't have the same exposure risk to pests, disease, coli outbreaks, things along that line. There's no pesticides used in any of these environments, which is another big advantage. I think it's really putting an emphasis on the importance of being able to develop more food security and bring our farms into our cities through the use of technology and plant science. We're always harvesting our crops the same day that we deliver to the consumer. And what that really does is ultimately saves them money, because here in Canada, we're throwing out about 60% of all the food that we grow and import here. And it's not necessarily because we're terribly wasteful people. It's just that the supply chain that we depend on is long and complex. A lot of food goes to waste there. We're harvesting our crops the same day we deliver to the consumer. So this is extending the shelf life of the products in your fridge, sometimes by as much as 600%. So, we're really making an impact in terms of, making your dollar that you spend on your food go further. In 5 years' time, we see ourselves expanding our manufacturing capacity. We think there's an opportunity to employ a lot of Albertans that were displaced or at least underutilized in the energy sector by helping us scale out these industrial facilities and building a network of farms across Canada in the urban settings and in remote communities to help build food security year-round across the country.
Thousands of kilometers away, the BC flood crisis was top of mind on Parliament Hill in Ottawa today.
For more than a week, Canadians have been watching devastating images out of British Columbia as floods ravage Abbotsford, Hope, and dozens of communities. I want to recognize that the minister has been in regular contact with the federal government's response to these tragic floods. So could the Prime Minister please update this House on the latest federal government efforts to deal with this disaster?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I thank the member opposite for bringing this up. I know that he and I and all members of this House, indeed all Canadians, stand with British Columbians during this extraordinarily difficult time. We are, as he said, in close contact with provincial authorities to make sure we're prepared for any further aid required. Federal resources have been on the ground since the very beginning and now have up to 500 CAF members on their ground, sandbagging, rescuing livestock, providing food and support to remote communities. We will continue to be there to support people in BC as we get through this and as we rebuild. It's what Canadians do. We stick up for each other. We're there for each other. We will continue.
MPs returned for the first time post-election today. Okay, it's a story we've followed closely here in BC. Now a religious order that ran 48 residential schools is entangled in a larger corporate structure with millions in assets. Julie Ireton leads the CBC investigation, revealing evidence of how new corporate entities were created as lawsuits and liabilities loomed.
When Evelyn Korkmaz was a little girl, she was forced to go to St. Anne's Indian Residential School in Fort Albany, Ontario. The Oblates of Mary Immaculate ran St. Anne's and many other schools across Canada.
Their valuables are more important than humanity.
In 2006, several Catholic entities promised to fundraise $25 million for survivors, but it came up with less than $4 million. Then the government released the church from its financial obligation.
When you sign an agreement and say that you are going to give monies to people, it's a contract. What right does Canada have to allow the church off the hook?
An investigation into just one Catholic order, the Oblates, reveals more than 24 charitable corporations with more than $200 million in combined assets. A main priority is the 300 aging and ailing priests left in the order. As this Saskatoon lawyer points out, during the time reparations were due, there's been a pattern of spending by the church.
They sold property in Ottawa to the tune of $32 million. We know that they spent over $110 million on the refurbishment of St. Michael's Cathedral in Toronto. We know that in Saskatoon, they built a $29 million plus cathedral at the same time as they're claiming poverty and unable to pay the reparations. I say that that's unfair.
No one's called them to task because they're the church, they're the good guys, they're a charity.
Lawyer Rob Talek has filed hundreds of historical sexual abuse cases against priests. He says the Oblates' method of corporate restructuring has protected them from liability.
Shortly after the residential schools were raised as a liability in the early 2000s, the Oblates suddenly restructured. And the way they did it is interesting because they didn't merge or they didn't create what we would call unions. They basically stood up a brand new corporation, transferred assets.
Oblate father Ken Thorson disagrees with Talek's characterization. Thorson says restructuring is a common practice among religious organizations. Evelyn Korkmaz says, along with money owed, residential school records are also a priority, and she hopes if Pope Francis visits Canada, he will ensure both are delivered. Julie Ireton, CBC News, Ottawa.
New findings tonight in the downing of Ukraine International Airlines flight PS752 shot down in Iran nearly 2 years ago. As Ashley Burke explains, the findings all come from an investigation commissioned by the families of the victims.
This is a phone.
The phone Iranian authorities say belonged to Ahmed Esmailian's wife and that it was allegedly found here. Amid the debris where flight PS752 crashed, he had hoped it contained clues about his wife and daughter's final moments.
We decided to hire a private investigator.
The investigator looked at several victims' mangled phones and says he found damage inconsistent with the plane downing, screws removed and memory cards wiped.
Probably people took the phone out and they started to filming when they were on the plane, the last moments of their lives. And after that, Islamic Republic of Iran, they collected all of the phones and they distracted the phones, and they gave these broken ones to us.
It's just one piece of new evidence that's part of a report that victims' families wrote themselves.
We do believe that there are lots of circumstantial evidence suggesting that it was intentional.
Families concluded that based on military experts' analysis and audio recordings, that top Iranian officials intentionally kept civilian airspace open and used the plane as a human shield against a possible U.S. attack in the days after Americans killed a top Iranian general.
We will examine the report.
The transport minister says the government's experts couldn't find evidence that the plane was intentionally targeted.
However, there's a mounting evidence of significant negligence that could rise even to a level of criminality in how the plane was shot down.
Canada issued a joint statement today with other countries expressing deep disappointment that Iran did not accept multiple requests to meet this week and negotiate reparations. But victims' families say that they've lost patience with Canada too, and what they want is an impartial international investigation. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
Let's go to the U.S. now, where a jury has convicted 3 white men of murder in the death of Ahmed Arbery. Makta Gebrselassie has more on the verdict and the reaction.
Guilty.
You hear Ahmed Arbery's father react as the 3 men accused of killing his son are found guilty of murder. Travis McMichael, his father Greg McMichael, and their neighbor William Roddy Bryan could be facing life in prison. It's a day Arbery's family worried would never come.
You know him as Ahmad. I know him as Quez. Yes. He will now rest in peace.
Amen.
Today is a good day.
This video of the deadly interaction in February of 2020 was crucial to the case. Captured by Brian on his cell phone, it showed the defendants chasing and cornering Arbery. And Travis McMichael shooting and killing him. Only after the video was leaked did charges come. In court, the defendants claimed it was a citizen's arrest, a shooting in self-defense. Here's the McMichaels' lawyer.
These are two men who honestly believed that what they were doing was the right thing to do.
But the prosecution said Arbery never stole anything from this house under construction and that he was in fact hunted. They played this 911 call from Greg McMichael.
There's a black male running down the street.
The prosecution making it clear that race played a major role here. The judge seeing that too with the jury selection.
This court has found that there appears to be intentional discrimination in the panel.
A nearly all-white jury was allowed and the trial went on. There were many moments of outrage. The defense was accused of dehumanizing the victim.
In his khaki shorts, with no socks, to cover his long, dirty toenails.
In the end, the defense tactic didn't work, the jury making the call in this second day of deliberations.
A jury of 11 whites and one black in the deep South stood up in the courtroom and said that black lives do matter.
The prosecution says this is justice for Ahmed Arbery.
And when you present the truth to people and they can see it, they will do the right thing. And that's what this jury did today.
The defendants are expected to file appeals, but for now, supporters of Arbery's family feel they finally have some accountability. Magda Gebrselassie, CBC News, Washington.
Roads, bridges, and connections washed away during BC's devastating floods. We take a closer look at the damage and what's been lost next.
When the new House of Commons meets in about 3 weeks, it'll look a lot different than the group that left Ottawa before the election. On all sides of the House, there will be more women MPs than ever. A record 39 women were elected, up from 27 in the last Parliament. As our social affairs specialist, Karen Webb, reports, groups who want to elect more women can point to some successes, but also some disappointments.
Well, if it couldn't have been me, it's another woman in elective office.
More women ran for this House of Commons than ever before, and more women won. Some of them, like the NDP's Joy Langan in British Columbia, even bumped off cabinet ministers. However, more women doesn't mean many women. Of the 295 MPs elected on Monday, only 39 are women, only 13%. Better than before, yes, but according to at least one of the new MPs, not nearly enough.
I think women experience the world differently from men, and we're not a minority group, and 13% is simply not enough to encompass the whole range of women's experience. No one woman can represent all women.
What hurts about the record is the fact that a lot of star women, a lot of important feminist women who made a very significant contribution to Canadian politics lost their seats.
Among the women who lost their seats, Lucy Pépin, the Liberal critic on childcare, and Flora MacDonald, the Conservatives' communications minister. There were years when MacDonald was the only woman in the Tory caucus.
I think there were a number of people who said she's been there for 16 years. Isn't that enough? Why don't we vote for someone else?
The Conservatives elected the most women, 21, although the party had the fewest women candidates. The Liberals elected 13. The NDP elected only 5.
Still a long way to go.
Pauline Jewett has sat in the House as both a Liberal and a New Democrat. She says it's up to the parties to get more women to run.
You've got to have the party leadership and the senior members of the party, our party included, give, day and night talk about the importance of getting more women nominated. And we didn't do that sufficiently in parts of the country.
During the campaign, as the parties put forward their candidates to talk about the issues, It became obvious there are some where the so-called women's vote in the House may make a difference, when it comes to the free vote on abortion, for instance. The most commonly held position among women of all parties from all regions is that abortion should not be banned.
That a decision to seek an abortion should be a decision between a woman and her physician.
The women's movement would like to see a House of Commons that's half women. That's because women make up roughly half the population. However, most observers say a 50% House is still many elections off in the future. Karen Webb, CBC News, Vancouver.
Let's take you back to our top story now. We're learning more about one of the people killed in the landslide near Lillooet. One man was in the process of moving his life and his family from Peachland to Victoria. His sister spoke exclusively with the CBC tonight. Cameron McIntosh has his story and the loss felt across the country.
Well known in Toronto's restaurant industry, remembered as selfless and caring by his family. 36-year-old Brett Diedrichs was swept away and killed in the mudslide near Lillooet while moving to Victoria with his partner, trying to start a new life as a firefighter.
So my brother got out of the car to go and see if he could help.
His sister, Kirsten Diedrichs, says their mother was also traveling with the couple. Bad weather put them on Highway 99 near Lillooet.
They heard a really intense, loud rumble and the whole ground shook. And last thing my mom remembers is my brother just screamed, "Mom, get back in your car." When she did, just in the nick of time, she said her bum basically touched the seat and the whole car started to slide off the mountainside.
When the landslide came down, it kind of pushed them off to the side.
Kathy Rennie helped get Diedrich's mother and partner to safety as others searched.
They're the ones that I'm doing first aid on. And it wasn't so much first aid, more than let's just remain hopeful.
My brother just couldn't make it back. He was immediately lost.
He's easily one of the best people that I know.
Stina Pham was a close friend of Diedrich's in Toronto.
Even now, it's been a week and a half, and I'm still hoping that he's going to turn up somewhere.
Diedrichs is one of 5 people killed in the mudslide, including Stephen Taylor, formerly of Calgary, and Anita and Mursad Hadzik, who leave behind a 2-year-old. Over the weekend, RCMP called off the search for Diedrich's body. The debris field too large, too dangerous.
Because he's my brother, I would really like to see the search continued, but I do believe that everything that is being done has been and will continue to be done.
Amid all the damage of an unfolding natural disaster, a loss of life that will never be replaced. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Vancouver.
Let's take a closer look now at the community of Spence's Bridge. People there now saying their situation is desperate. Much of Highway 8 is completely gone. Massive sections washed out in last week's floods. As the CBC's Michelle Gassoub reports, some people lost not only their homes, but the very land they lived and farmed on.
Located between Merritt and Spence's Bridge, the damage to Highway 8 is catastrophic. 18 segments of the highway, including 4 bridges, washed away.
There's roads to nowhere off the bridges. You just fall into the abyss of a former riverbed, and it's just and rock wall.
A woman in her 70s, unable to evacuate from her home, is still missing.
And winter should be smart enough to go way up there. We hope he's Spicy, but Spicy's not going to stand a chance because the cougars are going to take her.
This couple's animals were eventually rescued, but they lost their house and 3 acres of land, swallowed up and washed away by the Nicola River.
When we got the truck off the driveway on the road, our whole land dropped. There was no water There's no water. Like when I got out, the water was still where it was. It had to have dug underneath, and it just dropped the land into the river. And that was all in a matter of probably 7-8 minutes.
With cell service spotty and roads cut off, the community says it feels isolated and concerned that rebuilding Highway 8 won't be a priority.
We're trying to, bring it to the forefront that this is an important highway, not just for the people that live there, but for, the next wildfire season and all that stuff too. It is an important safety route also.
Those in Spence's Bridge left wondering how you can rebuild when the land you once lived on is now rushing water. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
Raging winds, flooding, washed out roads, evacuations. It sounds familiar after everything we've gone through, but this natural disaster is hitting Canada's east coast. We take you to Newfoundland next. And at 6:44, a live look at a rainy Olympic Village in Whistler. The rains have arrived and the weather warnings are in. Johanna breaks down what's to come over the coming days. That's next. time now to check in with meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe again for another look at what's to come. And Joe, I want to start in Prince Rupert because this afternoon they started getting some pretty strong winds.
Yeah, that's right, Anita. Winds gusting over 80 kilometers per hour for several hours coming in from the south for Prince Rupert. In fact, I can show you what this looks like on the satellite and radar, and that has led to some localized damage, sounding like there's some damage to the roof on the hospital, so limited access in and out. A barge has also, it sounds like, run close to ground, and lots of power outages in the area as well, fluctuating as we get winds slowly easing, but wind warnings very much still in place for central and northern coastal sections. That's basically the end of the atmospheric river. What we're getting is sort of a frontal stream of moisture hitting the south coast right now. We're going to get the main event in the next, several hours, but the rain has started to come down heavily here in North Vancouver and already seeing pockets of heavy downpours for the island. Just a quick look at those rainfall totals again for this first of 3 atmospheric rivers over the next 6 days. The bullseye for this one, the west coast of the island, but getting upwards of 80 millimeters in through the Fraser Valley out towards Hope. I want to take you through the long-range timing. There's lots of talk about how active the storm track is. So that stream of yellow you're seeing right now, that's the first atmospheric river. I'm pausing you on Friday. That's a break day, but you can see the approaching storm off in the Pacific. That will be atmospheric river number 2, set to move in for this weekend. So there it is. It may be as strong, if not slightly stronger. Moderate confidence, though, on exactly where that bullseye is. Okay, it's going to be a wet weekend, and then behind it, bit of a break for Monday morning, Monday night into Tuesday. Look at that, a 3rd atmospheric river for early next week. This is the stormy time of the year for the West Coast, but a lot of these, especially the one we saw last week, absolutely supercharged, and many stations across the South Coast will be dealing with their wettest November ever on record, their wettest month ever on record, places like Abbotsford and Victoria. Tomorrow across the province, we'll be watching for a couple of centimeters in through places like Kelowna, but snow levels are rising, so you'll see that change over to rain. Here's that week laid out for you. Very wet day tomorrow, break day Friday, and then it looks like we get wet again for the weekend. At least, Anita, the silver lining with those weekend storms, no more snow to melt. So we'll get that all out of the way tomorrow.
Okay, good news. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
And similar to BC, Canada's east coast is experiencing stormy weather. Homes are flooded, roads are washed out, and communities are cut off. Matthew Moore takes us to Cape Breton.
All day yesterday, the Cape Breton Highlands was pounded by rain. Washouts, destroyed bridges, and intense flooding, all because of record rainfall. 263 millimeters of rain fell in Ingonish, all within 24 hours. And most dramatic of all, a man patrolling the highway, and suddenly...
And I was just about to get to Morns Lake. There was no road. I went down into the wash.
Davy Fraser was driving his truck last night. He was on the road, stopping people from entering dangerous areas with washouts. Then, when he started driving, a section of road collapsed beneath his truck.
And before I knew it, the truck was demolished, the airbags were up, and I was trying to catch my breath.
Fraser escaped with only minor injuries. Once daylight broke, it became clear he got lucky.
And when I got out the driver's door, there was still another, I would say probably 5 or 6 feet below me, with water, asphalt, mud going towards the ocean. Pitch black. And so I crawled out, got out around and walked to the opposite side of the vehicle and got up, climbed up on the broken asphalt, got up on the main road. And then I would say within minutes, the truck had washed away.
For several hours, roads on the south and north side of Ingonish were being washed away or blocked. No one could get in or out. This morning, crews made it so drivers could get to Sydney. Larry Dauphiny is the local councillor. He says he was expecting the storm to be just like any other.
And when I was driving around, I guess, lunchtime or whatever, and it was like, oh, things are normal. Yeah, a little bit of flooding, not bad. But within an hour, things just drastically changed. And I'd say by 2 or 3 o'clock, it was amazing here how much flooding was in the area. By 4 or 5 o'clock, it was, we were seeing landslides up around the clam flats in Ingonish Beach. Water was just everywhere.
Dauphiny believes there wasn't much damage done in the town, other than a few flooded basements and washed out driveways. Further north, another small community is cut off.
But right now we're it's quite a flow there, so we're cut off from the rest of the world.
Murdoch Burton shot some footage this morning showing where his road used to be. He estimated about a dozen families are cut off from the main road. The province says nearly 30 roads are still impassable. There's no timeline to get them all open again, but it won't be a quick fix. Matthew Moore, CBC News, Ingonish.
It's been a week and a half, but the difference is stark. We tell you the story behind these before and after pictures next.
Playing an ensemble is like being a very small piece of a huge puzzle and creating magic with everybody around you.
It's really motivating in a way because then I can get, I have a feel of the experience of professional musicians and even non-professional musicians. I learn a lot from each of them.
When you're a musician, you can practice on your own, you can practice together, but in some ways it doesn't mean anything until somebody actually hears it.
Performing for a live audience in a large ensemble like this, it's been about 2 years now.
My first time getting to do that with this ensemble.
It's such a different feeling playing live. You get the reaction from the audience and everything, and you can kind of just, it's a lot more emotional, I guess.
Really, really exciting. A little scary at the same time, but so exciting. The Upei One Symphony is an ensemble of community members, Upei Music alumni, and Upei Music students.
This is my second year as director of the Upei One Symphony. Started during the pandemic. Our current membership is around 42.
It's all wind instruments and percussion as well. So woodwind instruments, including all different types of clarinets, flute, saxophones as well, and brass instruments as well, like the French horn, the tuba, trumpet, trombone, and everything. And then we have our percussion instruments, marimba, timpani, bells, and cymbals.
Last year was an interesting year to take over as director. At first, we weren't able to work together as a full group. I had to take half the group at a time, and we could only work for half an hour at a time, and then we had to leave the room for half an hour to let the air exchange.
It was definitely hard because we could still play together, just not like live, so we could do recordings, and it was a great time, but it's definitely exciting getting back into live performance. I love whenever there's such an emotional response from the pieces that we play.
Well, I guess we're feeling kind of lofty with our aspirations, so all the music has to do with things kind of above the earth, the sky, the planets, flying. We even have a piece, a multi-movement piece called Ghosts.
Sometimes you have people crying or laughing during a performance, and it's always such a nice feeling because you know that they're enjoying it and getting different emotional responses from it.
And when you get that feedback from the audience, you know, with the applause and so on, it just raises your, I don't know, enthusiasm for what you're doing, and it tends to bring your music to a new level.
The fact that we'll be able to make that kind of magic with an audience as well just makes it even more magical and more enjoyable.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
CBC's annual Food Bank Day is Friday, December 3rd. Connect with your favorite CBC personalities virtually. Space is limited, so sign up today at cbc.ca/foodbankday. And CBC Vancouver's Stephen Quinn will moderate a panel of experts at a free UBC Dialogues discussion about responsible leadership in a post-pandemic world. Learn more at alumni.ubc.ca.
You know, we've been covering this flooding situation for the last week and a half. So Dan and Johanna are here now. We want to show you these incredible before and after photos of flood-stricken Abbotsford around this time last week compared to now. People had to be transported by boat after this intersection flooded. Now it's clear. This road was covered by water early last week, but as you can see, the waters have now receded. Now, right after the storm, a helicopter surveyed homes and farms on the Sumas Prairie. The water-soaked land's now visible, but far from back to normal. Just incredible. And even when I was there on Monday, I was standing in a spot where the water would have been up to my chest just a few days before.
It's incredible how quickly seemingly the water has drained, but those first images I know will be burnt into many people's memories for a long time to come.
You could see throughout all the stories that we've done, the resilience of the people who are out there. Farmers are used to hard times anyway, but the way that community is banded together, and those who've come in from work crews to others, inspiring in the midst of devastation.
Inspiring is the best word to describe it, Dan. That is it for our show tonight. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll see you tomorrow.